Hello everyone, I'm Kathy Myers, and we are so privileged to have with us today Bruce Foraker. Bruce is the Landscape Assistant Superintendent of Hershey's Mill Landscaping Company. Bruce has been here for 41 years. He's affectionately known as the Plant Doctor. You might be familiar, he offers a spring nature walk about the third weekend in May every single year. But we've had a lot of turnover here in Hershey's Mill. He's been on our channel before, but we thought we might want to introduce him to many of our new residents, and of course our former residents are always happy to see him again. Welcome, Bruce. We're so happy to have you with us today.
Very nice to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
And we're going to have a two-part interview today. The first 15 minutes, we're going to start off talking about the pond fountain that's been added to T number 2. We call it the pond near the village of Springton. And then the second part, we're going to just talk about everything that's going on here in the landscape department at Hershey's Mill. So let's start with a bang, Bruce. Why don't you tell us everything we need to know about this brand new beautiful fountain that we have?
Okay, thank you for the opportunity. The fountain was recently put into the number 2 T pond there by Springton Village. And of course, the number one reason, I think, for almost all the folks is how beautiful the fountain is. Being the naturalist that I am, I look at some of the other aspects that we have there. The fountain is very beneficial for the ecosystem of the pond. It does a couple of really good things for us there. Number one, circulates the water. It stops the water from being stratified in the summer, where we have a cold, unoxygenated layer low and an oxygenated layer up high. This fountain helps to circulate that water, so we have great oxygenation throughout the entire pond. The fountain also creates a situation where any debris or algae would be pushed to the sides by the wave action of the fountain. The fountain doesn't necessarily reduce the amount of algae, but it makes the center of the pond look a lot clearer, and that's one of the real benefits that you do get from the pond. So those are a couple of the great things that we get from the pond.
Before I continue, I almost forgot the most important questions. You're such a wealth of information. I should ask you a little bit about your educational background, and I understand your family's been in this business, so tell us a little bit about your education and your family.
Yeah, I started in the green industry when I was about 12 years old. My parents had flower shops and 3 greenhouses in Media and Springfield, excuse me. So I got my beginnings there, and then I went on to 2 years of education at Delaware County Community College, and an additional 2 years of education at Longwood Gardens with a horticultural degree from them. So that got me started in the business, and I've kind of moved into the natural aspects of horticulture, knowing and caring for the native plants in the environment.
Hey, wow. So you must really love what you do, because you've been immersed in it all these years.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so tell us, what is the history of the pond and how did it come to be?
Well, the original construction of the pond was part of our construction of the villages of Robinwood, Quaker, and the road systems in between. A couple of the things that have happened since the onset of the pond, say 20 years ago or more, about 7 years ago, the pond became silted up. The original depth was gone. We had a pond about 1 to 2 feet in depth, so we had to dredge the pond, and that was a very expensive operation funded by the Master Association here at Hershey's Mill. So one of our goals after the dredging was to make sure, or do everything in our power, to prevent the silt from building up in the pond again and having to incur that cost at a later date. And many of the things that we've done with the pond have been geared and aimed towards that goal.
And we noticed that you plant a lot of native plants around the pond. Why is that?
Well, native plants serve a number of different purposes here. And as I said, I always look at these things a little different than some folks do. I hope the folks enjoy the beauty of the flowers that we have there, but the number one purpose and functionality of the plants is to save the pond. The pond is a dynamic environment. It's almost like a living thing. The plants around the edge of the pond prevent the shoreline of the pond from being eroded, that erosion would eventually end up in the center of the pond, built up as silt again. So by planting the plants, we have secured the shoreline of the pond from ending up in the middle of the pond and creating a problem later on.
Okay, well, that makes sense. And tell us about all the wildlife and animals in and around the pond.
Yeah, so we're going to start with a couple of pictures here of some of these great native plants. And one of the things that I've done with the native plants, we'll go to the first one here. This is a picture of Asclepius Tuberosa with a couple of beautiful insects on it. And that's one of the things I love about the native plants, is that they attract these great pollinators. If you're paying attention to the news lately, just last night, one of the insects here is a bumblebee. Just last night on the news, the saddle-backed bumblebee was put on the endangered species list. It doesn't sound like a lot to a lot of folks, but all of our pollinators are really, really needed now. Our honeybees are failing, and the native plants attract these pollinators, and they bring nature back to us. We've lost many of our native plants with the onset of our homes here. And the way we can reproduce that and get these great animals and insects to come back is to use these native plants. So we exclusively use native plants and do everything we can to eliminate invasive plants that would destroy the native plants if they were allowed to continue. So we actively manage these areas. We call that the BMP, Best Management Practices. It means we do a lot of different things to keep the pond healthy.
Bruce, these pictures are exquisite.
Thank you.
You are a photographer, I would have to say, in addition to all your other duties.
Well, thank you. Let's go through a couple of these, and I'll point out some of these plants. And you can see something flowering. I've specially selected the plants around all of our ponds to always have a plant in bloom during the growing season. So from spring till fall, you'll always find something flowering there. And if you don't, come see me. I'll be happy to take you down and show you.
No, I take a walk every evening, and I can attest to that. There's always something going on.
This is Iris Pseudochorus. It's one of my favorite plants to put around the ponds. It's very, very strong, and it's very, very tall. So it not only has a great root system to secure the edge of the pond in place, but it also helps to keep geese out of our ponds. Geese are a big problem in the ponds. They create nutrients, which add to our algae problems. So the fewer geese we have, the better. The plants create a tall area around the pond that the geese do not feel comfortable moving through, so they will not come in and out of the pond as readily. Here you can see the Iris Pseudochorus, and we did a great thing here for the benefit and cost for all the residents here at Hershey's Mill. These plants were dug up and moved from another pond. They're very prolific, and I was able to get all of these plants for free. All we had to do was provide the labor and the installation, and now we have a great system in this pond. And in the early spring, you'll see these blooming. They're very beautiful, and you can see the reflection in the water here. You know, it's a great scene when they're blooming. Let's take a look at the next one here. And here we have a goldenrod, a very misunderstood plant, a wonderful plant to have in the fall. It's, I think, as pretty as our daffodils and whatnot that we have in the springtime. But a lot of folks I've found don't necessarily appreciate it. I think there's a rumor going around that is incorrect, that goldenrod adds to allergy problems.
Right, that's what I've always heard.
It does not. Colorful flowers do not have pollen that blow in the wind. They depend on that little guy right there, the bumblebee, to move their pollen from one plant to another. It's never in the air, so you can never breathe it. Plants without colorful flowers depend on the wind to pollinate them, and because of that, that is the plant that you are allergic to. Unfortunately, or for the goldenrod reputation, the ragweed is blooming at the exact same time, and that is the one you are allergic to, and almost no one would ever be able to even identify it or know even where it's at. So that's just one of those little things that happens, and this is a great plant and really should be appreciated. This is another one of my favorite native plants. This is jewelweed. This is the wild impatiens that you have. Almost everyone knows impatiens. We've been planting them for many, many years in our flower beds at home. This is the wild variety of impatiens. The hummingbirds absolutely love this plant.
Now, how are you pronouncing that? How do you say that?
Jewelweed, just like
J with a J?
Yes, with a J, just like a diamond or ruby.
But it's a weed?
No, it is not a weed. Thank you for thank you very much for bringing that up. I hate the term weed. I didn't invent it. I didn't name them, but I have to use the name that is put on the plant, and that is jewelweed. And again, it is a variety of impatiens. So here's another plant that we have, another goldenrod. We have 4 or 5 different species of goldenrod, actually. So you can see there is a honeybee right in the middle on this one. Let's go to the next one here. Here we have some asters blooming. September, October, you're going to see the different colored asters, purple and white and blue to some degree. So you're going to see those around the ponds as well. Here we have my favorite aquatic plant. This is called pickerel weed. And this is a great shot of the golfers, the lady golfers there, with the pickerel weed around the pond by the number 5 green. And that is a great plant because it grows in the water. So it gives us a double buffer where we have the iris on the shore, the pickerel weed actually in the water. This plant creates the terrific environment for frogs and baby fish to survive. If you don't have something for baby fish to hide in, the big fish eat them right up. So it's a great thing to have this available, and we have a much better fish population because of that. Here is Asclepius, this is another Asclepius called swamp milkweed, another one of my favorite. All the milkweeds attract monarch butterflies. Monarch butterflies are seriously endangered right now. So when we plant milkweed, we're helping a very great insect there. This is swamp mallow, beautiful plant. This is one that is in the Jefferson pond. I'm going to be putting this in some of our other ponds because I like it so much. A great native plant. I saw this growing wild on the island of Asclepius in Virginia when I was on vacation a little while ago. So I was taken by it and I decided to use it here. This is Cardinal Flower, another one of my favorites. This is my #1 favorite hummingbird plant. Great plant for our edges of our ponds. Also will grow very nicely in your garden at home. And if you keep an eye out, I guarantee you're going to see some hummingbirds coming.
Wow, I want some hummingbirds, so I'm going to get one of those.
There you go. Just give it a little extra water and it'll grow great in your garden. Here we have the Japanese koi. The Japanese koi were put in the pond when they were about this big. I put them in there personally. They were only about 2 inches long. They now weigh 15 to 20 pounds. That was 7 years ago. They do a very good job environmentally for the pond. They are herbivores like cows. They eat plants. We have too many plants in the water because of excessive nutrients in the water. So these fish help to balance that, whereas they consume some of those and help us to reduce chemical applications needed to control algae and some of these other unwanted plants. We have about 25 of these koi in the pond presently, and I'm amazed at the size that they've gotten to. And of course, again, I think most folks don't see quite what I see, but they see the beauty, and they are absolutely beautiful fish. They're actually prized in Japan and registered just like we register dogs in America.
They are beautiful. Yeah. I love to see them. Wow, look at this.
This is another one of my favorites. Only a face that only a mother could love. This is one of our American snapping turtles. And this guy is very old. Probably 40, I'm going to say 30, 40 years old. And between 35 and 45 pounds, you can see me struggling just to hold him up for the photograph there. And here is one of our koi. We moved some of the koi that escaped from the pond and ended up in the stream. We captured them and moved them into the #5 pond next to the #5 green on the golf course. So we now have a couple of them in there. And there are 3 or 4 more that are hiding in the stream that I'm going to eventually get and put probably into that same #5 pond. It needs a little extra help with the consumption of the algae and the other plants there. Some more animals that you're going to see around our pond, which are just fantastic. This is the great blue heron, and you routinely see them there eating the fish, which we're developing and growing in that ecosystem. Another part of the great plants that we have there are the insects there. I think the insects are just as beautiful as the plants. The insects are very colorful, especially the ones that eat milkweed. Milkweed is poisonous. The insects eat the plant so that they themselves will become poisonous. The colorfulness of the insects tells birds and all the other wildlife, do not tread on me, do not eat me, I am poisonous. And they very well know that pattern. There's another very colorful milkweed beetle that we have eating the milkweed. And again, very colorful and iridescent trying to keep away those predators. Here is a orb weaver spider that you'll find in those plants, and these, as you can see, a beautiful insect. None of the insects that you have here are dangerous. The bees that you see on the flowers, please do not be afraid of them. Stand and enjoy them and watch them, and their movements and their colors are so vibrant and interesting to watch. And while they're in the feeding mode of the flowers, there's no danger of being stung by these bees. They do not sting when they feed. They only sting when they're defending their home. So you're very safe even to have the children stand nearby. Don't touch them, but standing nearby and watching them is perfectly safe. This is a cicada killer. It is a huge wasp. If you saw it, you would run, but it is harmless. They almost never sting. The only thing they sting is a cicada. They prey on cicadas and bury them alive and parasitize them for their baby. Their baby will eat the cicada as it develops.
You know what? We're all done with our first 15 minutes, and we're going to come back and please join us for our second segment. As we said, he's a wealth of information. Come back. Hello, everyone. I'm Kathy Myers. Welcome back. This is part 2 of our discussion with Bruce Foraker. Bruce, again, nice to have you. We're continuing our discussion with the plant doctor, as he's affectionately known here in Hershey's Mill, and we were just looking at some exquisite photography. So why don't we just pick up where we left off, and why don't you just describe this picture for us?
This is the dragonfly. That you're probably all familiar with dragonflies. One of the things you may not realize about dragonflies is that they are completely aquatic, just like a mosquito. The larval form of the dragonfly lives underwater and is a great food source for our fish and other animals, even other invertebrates like tadpoles and things like that can eat them. So we'll go to the next photograph here. And we have a damselfly. Now, the way you can tell the damselfly from the dragonfly is the much skinnier body and very colorful wings and body parts. A number of the different species are different colored. So we'll also go to a spider here, and the reason that I took a picture of this particular spider is if any of you folks have ever watched some of these shows about the deadly animals in Australia, there is an insect in Australia, or a arachnid, I should say, in Australia called a funnel web spider. This is its American cousin. The funnel web spider is one of the most deadly insects on the planet. This one is harmless, thank God. But in any case, this is another really neat insect that you might see in and among the plants that we plant around the pond, just to show you the great ecosystem that we do have there. Okay, that's pretty much the end of some of my photographs there.
Well, we were talking about the ponds and the streams, so how many ponds do we have here in the mill?
We had 9 ponds, now we have 8 ponds. One of our ponds recently became a wetland. And that is the pond that is in between Lincoln Village and Kennett Village. That pond had been there since the beginning of the construction, and it had silted up to the point where it basically was a wetland. We had the DEP approve the removal of the dam structure there, which is something the state of Pennsylvania wants everyone to do whenever possible. So we removed the dam, and now we have a great wetland ecosystem that is going to start to develop there. And it is already completely green, only 3 weeks after the removal of the dam. So that's going to be a great area for the future.
And in addition to the ponds, we also have streams here, correct?
Yes. We have 2 streams on our property. Both of them actually are part of Ridley Creek, and they flow through the Ridley Creek State Park on Westchester Pike after they leave our property. So one of the things that's really important mentioning the streams, of course, all of our ponds and all of our streams are connected together. All the waters in our area are connected together. As they move downstream, these waters belong to the state of Pennsylvania. They do not belong to Hershey's Mill or any other homeowner. They are used for, in certain areas, as water intake and drinking water for other people. So we must be very careful about the things that we do with our water, and the stewardship of our water is a very important thing.
So how do we care for them?
Well, I'm going to go through a couple of our ponds and tell you some of the things that we do. And again, we use that term BMP, a best management practice. We do different things with different ponds. I'm going to start with our front entrance pond. It's the first pond that we put the riparian buffer strip around. And I'm talking about those plants that are around the edge of the pond. The correct term for that is a riparian area. And that was the first one we did. We did that about 15 years ago or more, and it has developed very nicely. So really all we do there is we keep out the invasive plants. The one side of the pond has trees and shrubs, which are even better than the plants that we put in functionality. The plants and flowers are more beautiful. We like to use those on the home side of the ponds. Our management practice there is to mow those plants down once a year and let them start again so that no large trees or shrubs develop to obscure the view of the pond. Of course, if we have a pond, we like to see it.
Of course.
So this is what we do so that the view is always going to be there, and hopefully the view is framed with these beautiful flowers that we have. The plantings also help us, and I think I may have mentioned this, keep out the Canada geese. So that's another purpose in that BMP that we are trying to accomplish. The plants also shade the very edge of the pond, which is the most vulnerable area for the growth of algae because it's the shallowest. The sunlight penetrates through the water to the bottom of the pond, which is where the algae actually grows. Even though we see it floating on the surface, it's actually growing on the bottom, and then it breaks free and floats up. So by shading those areas, we get much less algae. The deeper the pond is, the less penetration of the sun, the less algae problems that we have. So that's what we're doing with our front entrance pond. The next pond, I guess I could talk about a little bit here, is one of our larger ponds. I call it the Eaton Franklin pond. It's the one that you see on the number 9 golf course hole, and it can also be seen near our vegetable gardens as you go up the Chandler Drive road. You'll see that pond. That pond was originally built for the purpose of irrigation of the original golf course. That function of that pond is no longer needed now. We use our sewage treatment plant effluent water to water our golf course, which is a terrific environmental thing to be doing here. Recycling our own water, self-containing our community, and not using public water supplies to water our golf course. When the other golf courses are dying, we have a great system here to water our golf course with. And that's what that pond was originally built for. Right now, unfortunately, that pond only has stormwater inflow. So that means it's being filled by rainwater through the drainage system in the different villages. That's why it's very important for us to make sure that nothing goes down the drains in our villages. Don't let the carpet guy put his hose in the drain out front because it goes into our ponds. I've caught these folks a few times and told them, take it out of there. So in any case, we need to be careful about what goes in. We also have geese adding nutrients to the pond. We also have our own fertilizers adding nutrients to the pond. One of the things I like to brag about is that the fact that both the golf course and the Hershey's Mill Landscape Company specifically blend our fertilizers so that they have very, very little of any polluting qualities to them. And we have soil tests, and those fertilizers are blended to the soil test so that we only have the nutrients for the turf that we need, and hopefully very little runoff into our ponds. But it is still a factor. So those are a couple of things to consider about those ponds. The other thing I'd like to mention about that Eaton Franklin pond is that we corrected a very serious problem with our plantings around the pond. They were losing their fairway due to erosion. Heavy rains were washing the edge of the fairway right into the pond. The golfers were having to deal with ditches in the middle of the fairway. And I said, let's get this riparian area straightened out. We repaired the fairway, put in the plants, zero erosion. Absolutely no further loss of the plant simply by putting in these plants. I know sometimes the golfers may lose their ball in those areas, and there may be a few choice words there, but I think they understand also the importance of some of these, and I hope that they appreciate the beauty while they're playing golf. I think it's a great thing to play the game of golf and be able to enjoy some beautiful plants in the process.
How about the water quality here? How is it?
We have very good water quality here. And the reason that we have the great water quality is the riparian areas. almost all the areas that have a connection from turf to water are bordered by these riparian native flower areas, or simply native areas that we have not put our own plants into, but that nature provided all the protection needed there. So there's very little runoff into our water, and our water remains clean and clear. And one of the reasons that I can say I know that is that we have a great community of invertebrates in our ponds and streams. The dragonflies, the insect larvae that live in our ponds and streams, as well as we have clams that live, freshwater clams that live in our ponds and streams. And the freshwater clam is considered to be like the canary in the coal mine. It denotes high water quality. They won't survive in water that it has a low water quality to it. So just seeing these animals tells me that we're really good with our water quality.
I bet half of our residents had no idea that as all of this is going on behind the scenes. We know we live in a heavenly place. We know it's absolutely like living in a park. It's magnificent. But I bet they really had no idea what Mike, Neil, and yourself are up to so that we can all enjoy it all.
Yes, mentioning Mike, he is the superintendent of the company, and he does an unbelievable job. He's tireless in his dedication to the community, and when I tell him what we need, he may not understand everything I'm saying, but he is always very accepting and helpful in trying to accomplish some of the environmental goals that we have in horticulture here at Hershey's Mill. I mean, the work that we do, the people that we have on staff were specially selected to serve and the specific needs that we have here at the Hershey's Mill community.
Well, we've got about 4 or 5 minutes left, so have we covered everything we need to say about our pond and how we manage them and about the fish? What else would you like to tell us?
Well, there's a couple more ponds I guess I can mention. I'm not going to mention them all, but we also have the Lincoln Kennett pond we talked about with the removal of the dam and that becoming the wetland, and that's a great situation there. We also have another pond behind Lincoln Village and behind, I think it's number 4 Green, and that is a pond we've done absolutely no work to at all. We simply allow the native plants to establish themselves around the pond. Unfortunately, there are some non-native plants there which are a bit invasive. Those plants, we kind of wish they weren't there, but for right now they provide habitat, and we're going to, at some point we may go in there and start removing some of those and add in some new native plants. But right now the pond does pretty good on its own. We also have another pond at the tennis courts, which is behind the tennis courts. That also receives very little actual active maintenance. It's surrounded by native plants, so they're really doing the job for us. The ones that we need to work on are the ones that we've taken away all those native plants, and we have this grass-water interface, and that's where our biggest problems come into play that we've been working on so much.
And do we ever have to worry about flooding? I know you're in charge of mowing and fertilizing and pruning and all that, you and Mike, but what about flooding?
Thank you for asking me that one. That is a question that I get from a number of folks here. The first thing I'd like to say about the possibility of flooding from our streams is that we have a very well-engineered storm water system. The drains, the ponds, all have emergency systems built into them so that even if the drain itself is completely overwhelmed, the water from, say, any of our ponds would go over the emergency spillway and back into the stream and bypass the normal exit system of the pond and go through a separate pipe system in many cases to get back into the stream. So that prevents the water from rising up any higher. And in all the years that I've been here, I think I've only seen the water crest over our roads maybe 1 or 2 times. So that's very unusual, and it was very minor even at that point. So I'm very happy with how that works. And the things that we're doing, the plants themselves also help with filtering the water, slowing down the force of the water so that it's not charging into the stream and washing away that soil again. This is one of the big things, is trying to keep that soil in place. And our ponds and streams and many of our basins around the villages are specifically intended to eliminate that silt from getting into the stream and ending up in another pond somewhere too.
Well, we've got about 2 minutes left. What do we need to know before we let you go? I'm sure we'll have to have you back every year from now on, I think, really.
Well, I think we need to be conscious of our water and make sure that we ourselves are not doing things, like I said, like watching the carpet cleaning guy and making sure that when we're changing our oil, if we do that in our driveways or at any place here at the mill, that we make sure that the oil goes in the recycling container and not onto the driveway. Make sure that our plants or our cars and whatnot are not leaking fluids on the road. The roads are a major place where things like that get in. And again, as I was saying, we work very well with our fertilizers in trying to eliminate any pesticide and fertilizer problems. Our pesticides are chosen to be the least toxic available, and we apply them in a very environmentally sound way. We do not do what some landscape people do, is what we call blanket spraying. Absolutely do not do that. If there is not a reason for us to spray a pesticide, it will not be sprayed. All of the people that are on our staff that touch chemicals in any way are certified by me with the state of Pennsylvania for training in their skill with the pesticides so that we don't get pollutants into the water. They all know the situation and how close they're allowed to be to water sources while they're using any of our products.
Bruce, you're unbelievable. We thank you so much for your knowledge, for your time, for your dedication. We're just so thrilled to have you here, and we're just blessed to be here. Thank you very much for visiting us today at Hershey's Mill Channel 20. Stay tuned and stay informed.
Thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it. I hope everyone got a little something out of the talk. Thank you.